Why are we here? For what reason does this Parliament exist? We are here to represent and exercise the will of the Australian people. We are their servants and they are our employers. We are here by their leave, with their permission to do what they tell us to do. And for many, many years, the Australian people have been telling us to lower immigration, to keep the numbers low, to put the interest of Australians living here before the interest of foreigners who don't. Since the election of the Albanese Labor government, these calls have grown louder and stronger. They're being heard in the newspaper columns of economic commentators and housing experts. They're being heard in the growing lines of people waiting to inspect a single property in the hope of securing a rental. They're being heard around family dinner tables as Australians struggle to find the money for huge rent hikes amid our cost of living crisis. They're being heard in the daily traffic jams as record numbers of immigrants flood our cities and increase congestion. They're being heard in the growing cities of tents and swags and cars popping up around Australia as more and more people fall into homelessness and despair. And the Albanese government is deaf to all of them. In January this year, there were just over 125,000 new arrivals. That's more than the entire population of Ballarat and almost as much as Darwin's in a single month. Since the election, the number of new arrivals has reached more than 1 million. Australia is experiencing the biggest two-year population surge in the country's history. There are now 27 million people in Australia. It's a staggering number. In September 2003, the Bureau of Statistics published a projection for Australia which said our population would reach a figure between 23 million and 31 million people by the year 2051. With our current immigration levels, Australia is on track to have more than 31 million people before 2035, 16 years earlier than the ABS projected. And this has happened despite the majority of Australians being firmly against it. The majority of Australians do not want a big Australia. This is confirmed every time Australians are polled on the issue. Let's have a look at those numbers. News poll 2018, 56% of Australians want lower immigration. Essential poll 2018, 64% of Australians believe immigration was too high. Australian National University poll 2019, 70% of Australians did not support further population growth. Resolve Strategic Survey 2021, 58% of Australians. Australian Population Research Institute survey, October 2021, 69%. The Australian Population Research Institute survey, February 2023, 70% of Australians wanted lower levels of immigration. This is all about lowering immigration, don't want higher population. Essential poll, May 2023, 60% of Australians. Resolve Strategic Survey, July 2023, 59%. ABC's Q&A program, August 2023, 65% of Australians wanted immigration cut to relieve pressure on housing. Resolve Strategic Poll, December 2023, 62% of Australians said immigration was too high and 74% thought immigration under the Albanese Labor government was unplanned and unmanaged. And there was the Freshwater Poll, another 61%. Labor isn't listening. Not interested. And the coalition didn't listen either until I kept putting pressure on them, and it was around about 260,000, and then Prime Minister Morrison dropped it to about 190,000. One Nation has always championed lower immigration in solidarity with the Australian people. I've been saying it since I first came here. Here's what I said in my maiden speech as the member for Oxley. In 1996, immigration must be halted in the short term so that our dole queues are not added to by, in many cases, unskilled migrants not fluent in the English language. I also warned we were in danger of being swamped by immigration from Asia.
The parliamentary exchange over immigration intensifies into a highly charged and emotionally loaded confrontation as Pauline Hanson delivers a powerful critique of the government's immigration policy, arguing that it is disconnected from the realities faced by everyday Australians. She begins by framing Parliament as an institution that exists to serve the will of the people, insisting that elected officials are accountable to citizens who are increasingly concerned about rising population levels, housing shortages, and pressure on essential services. Throughout her address, she paints a picture of a country under strain, pointing to overcrowded cities, long rental queues, rising homelessness, and growing infrastructure pressure as evidence that current immigration settings are no longer sustainable. Her argument builds momentum as she cites public opinion polls suggesting that a majority of Australians support reduced immigration, using these figures to reinforce her claim that government policy is out of step with public sentiment. She contrasts these concerns with what she describes as political inaction, accusing both major parties of ignoring widespread public frustration while continuing to maintain high migration levels. As the speech progresses, she draws on her long political history, referencing earlier warnings she made decades ago about population growth and immigration pressures, arguing that current conditions validate those concerns. She then escalates her position by calling for a national vote or plebiscite on immigration, stating that Australians should be given a direct democratic voice on an issue that affects housing, jobs, infrastructure, and long-term national planning. According to her argument, the absence of such a mechanism has created a widening gap between government decision-making and the lived experiences of ordinary citizens, particularly young Australians struggling to enter the housing market and families dealing with rising cost of living pressures. She further links immigration levels to broader systemic challenges, arguing that rapid population growth has outpaced infrastructure development, resulting in congested roads, overburdened hospitals, stretched public services, and increased competition for housing. She also criticizes government priorities, suggesting that funding decisions have not adequately addressed these pressing domestic issues, and she frames this as evidence of a political system that is no longer responsive to public needs. As her remarks continue, the tone becomes more forceful, as she questions the economic justification for high immigration, arguing that while migration may support certain sectors of the economy, it does not necessarily translate into improved living standards for everyday Australians. She emphasizes that economic growth measured in aggregate figures does not reflect individual hardship, particularly for those facing rent increases, mortgage stress, and declining housing affordability. In her conclusion, she calls for an immediate reduction in immigration levels, insisting that Australia must first stabilize its housing market, infrastructure capacity, and essential services before continuing to expand population intake. If you found this breakdown insightful, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss powerful political analysis and breaking parliamentary moments. Share your opinion in the comments. Do you think Australia should reduce immigration or maintain current levels?